In the resurrection, we are like the Melachim, because at that instant, what kind of an instant? A moment, the twinkling of an eye. In that instant, that nanosecond, we are like the angels. But what happens when the nanosecond is over? Make sense? That nanosecond, we are like the angels. But now we have 1,000 years to rule and reign with Yeshua. So let me get this straight. This is why I wrote the book, Sex and the Believer. I want you to hand it to pastors and rabbis to get their congregation set straight. It's not just for you, that book. So let me get this straight. I'm saved. Frank is saved. He's forgiven. He's the beneficiary of the kingdom, an heir of salvation, a joint heir with Mashiach. And for 1,000 years, he can't have any intimacy with anybody. And all the pagans are having orgies. Well, don't worry, brother. You'll get to rule and reign over the nations with a rod of iron. That's nice, but I also want to have some sex. While I'm ruling and reigning and banging them over the head.
All right.
What's wrong with this picture? What is wrong with this picture? All the nations who are lost, they have marriages, 4 marriages, boyfriend, 4's company, 10's company, 3's company. Everybody's having company. And I got to just keep banging people over the head with the Torah. Obey, obey, Johnny 5, Johnny 5, obey, Shabbat, Kashrut, Moadim, Tzitzit, Head Kuveros, Kaveros, boom, boom. What is wrong with this religious picture? So religion wants us to believe that as resurrected beings, we are in the kingdom, we have no pleasure, we don't even have a wife at this point, because the marriage covenant was broken at the time that we died, or our spouse died. So we have no marriage, no reproduction, no pleasures of the flesh, because we're in the millennial kingdom. Meantime, the pagans all around us are granted a privilege and a pleasure that we don't have. Because you know why? Because we are saved. And because we're saved, we are spirit beings. And because we are spirit beings, we don't need that carnality, right? Right? Really? Exactly who are the resurrected married to in the millennial kingdom, in the Atid Lava? Only Yeshua knows. What happened to our marriage? It was dissolved. When? In a moment? In the twinkling of an eye. Our marriage was dissolved. Till death do us. Till death do us. So when is our marriage dissolved? At the point of death. If your wife is very saved, somewhat saved, not saved, or none of the above, irrelevant, death will annul every single marriage covenant. So then the heathen are reproducing and having children. We're ruling and reigning over the heathen, Revelation 20 verse 4, for 1,000 years. Question is, as touching the resurrection, in the resurrection, are we married? No. Because in that moment, in that what? 1 Corinthians 15:52, in that twinkling of an eye, what? We're not married, we're not given in marriage, we're like the angels, we assume an ability to fly and to join Yeshua in the heavens. Can I hear a good amen? So we fly in the resurrection. Since the righteous, the Tzaddukim, the Sadducees, back in Matthew 22, since the Tzaddukim, the Sadducees, asked the wrong question, we will never know the answer until we get into the kingdom. Because they didn't say, hey, 7 men had her as a wife. In the kingdom, whose wife will she be? They didn't ask that, Rabbi Zechariah. The Sadducees did not ask, in the kingdom, whose wife will she be? They say, touching the resurrection. In the resurrection. Well, whose wife will she be? Nobody's. Because the resurrection is a twinkling of an eye. So in the resurrection, which of those 7 brothers will have her as a wife? Great. In that nanosecond, which of those brothers will have her as a wife? None of them. So because the Sadducees, who were not spirit-filled, obviously, asked the wrong question, we are going to have to wait until the Atid Lavo, the kingdom, to find out which one of those 7 brothers had her as a wife. Does any of this make sense? A lot of sense. Because they asked the wrong questions. Which is why education is so important. Not being ignorant of the Kitvei HaKadoshim. What did Yeshua tell the Tzaddukim? You're ignorant. You don't know the power of Elohai. He doesn't rule over the dead. He rules over the living. And P.S. you don't know the Kitvei HaKadoshim. Stop pretending to teach people about human sexuality and marriage and divorce when you don't know the first thing about it. And that's where the problem. That was the problem, it remains the problem, and it will continue to be the problem until you wiggle your way out of what you've been taught. Is anyone hearing me today?
Amen.
So when you get this book, yeah, I can use the 23 bucks after I pay the printer 20. Not a heck of a lot left. But you need to get these books by the dozen, because pastors and churches need to understand what Yahweh is doing in the earth. You need to hand them out and mail them and send them. You know what I'm talking about. If I want to make money, I'll make more money on the Bible. Go order the Bible if you want to support the ministry. I make more money. On this book, not a money. This is it's a healing manual for the people of Yahweh. It's healing. You know, some people like being sick. They don't want healing. That's sick. When Yahweh wants to set you free and you're happy being sick, that's sick. So the monogamous couple who's married 40 years ago in a Baptist church, they hate each other, they're just waiting for each other to drop dead. That's not life. Yeshua said, I have come to give you life and give it more abundantly. He has better things in this life.
Amen. Amen.
So we get to the kingdom. According to religion, the saved have no pleasure, earthly pleasure. Well, let me get this straight. The saved have no earthly pleasure, even though we're on earth. The saved have no earthly pleasure, even though we use the Torah to rule and reign over the earthly nations, Darrell. But we can't. There'll be no earthly pleasure, Althea. That's exactly what you've been taught. In the kingdom, it's all going to be this. Like the village people. Why? And we're going to be doing in the kingdom, you know. YMCA. Talking about what? Why? Get real, man. Snap out of it. So let me get this straight. It's an earthly kingdom based on Torah principles. We're going to rule the earthly nations. They're all having wonderful physical pleasure, and all we're doing is running around with a hammer, spanking people over the head, getting them to obey Torah. Pardon me. I'm not buying. I'm not buying. That is not Yahweh's way, and I don't want to be ignorant of the Kitvei HaKadosh. I'm not buying. Go look for someone else to buy. Yahweh has a better way. Have I lost anybody so far? No. Tov. Go to Gileanah 21:23. So because they asked the wrong question, whose wife will she be in the millennial kingdom? We don't know which of those 7 brothers will have her as the wife in the millennial kingdom, because they did not ask about the kingdom, marriage in the world to come. They didn't ask about marriage in the kingdom. They asked about marriage touching the resurrection, and what does Rav Shaul tell us in 1 Corinthians 15? They asked about marriage in a nanosecond, in the twinkling of an eye. So what kind of marriage, what kind of sexual intimacy can you have in a nanosecond? They asked the wrong question. What was the correct question? In the Olam Haba, whose wife will she be in the Olam Haba, in the world to come? Are you with me? That was the correct question. We won't know the answer, which of those 7 brothers had her as a wife until we enter the millennial kingdom. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it. For the Tiferet of Yahweh did brighten it, and the Lamb is the light of it. Someone said to me, well, it doesn't say there'll be no sun and no moon. It just says there'll be no need of the sun and the moon. Okay, I'm not going to argue. I got no problem either way. If the sun is there or it's not there, either way, I'm there, you're there, Yeshua's there. And the nations of those that are saved, circle those words, the nations of those who are saved shall walk in the light of it. And Melachim, kings of the Olam, the world, will bring their Tiferet and honor to it. The gate of it shall not be shut all day, for there shall be no night there. And they shall bring the Tiferet and honor of the nations to it. And there shall by no means enter into that city anyone who is unclean or whoever works abomination, and or makes up lies. But only those who are written in the Lamb's Sefer, what? HaChaim. So, in other words, we are the bride of Yeshua, and we will be part of the bride of the nations who are saved. Notice the nations are a collective group of believers, the bride of Moshiach. Now, if we are the nations that are saved, and if we are the bride of Moshiach, then we must be blessed with the capacity to reproduce. Because when are we like the angels? In a moment? Don't lose me. When are we like the angels? Where we don't reproduce. Where we don't marry. Where we're not given in marriage. In a moment, touching the resurrection, in the resurrection, we are like the Melachim. We simply fly into our new glory and into the new thing that Yahweh has prepared for us. Can I hear a good amen?
Amen.
But what about after that moment? What about after that twinkling of an eye? Now I'm ruling and reigning for 1,000 years. I'm part of the bride of Yeshua, the plural bride of many nations and many members who make up the saved commonwealth of Israel. And I'm married to the Lamb, and I'm ruling, you and I are ruling and reigning over the nations, and we cannot reproduce. Religion has told us we're going to be too busy floating and preparing our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, because after all, we need to eat so we can float. To even suggest, Sister Althea, that you and I are going to be having sex in the kingdom is blasphemy. You're going to go straight to hell. Father McGillicuddy, in 2 seconds, would have you in purgatory. To even suggest that a born-again, spirit-filled child of Yahweh is going to have any kind of reproductive capacity in the millennial kingdom, you definitely are a candidate for the jacket that is straight. Try telling this to your Southern Baptist friend, or to your religiously hung-up friend. Brother, I can show you in the Word of Yahweh where during the kingdom of during the Atid Lavo, not only are we going to be ruling and reigning over the nations with Yahweh's blessed Torah, we're also going to be enjoying sex, but not with our wife or our husband, because what happened in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye? What happened in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye? That covenant was what? Dissolved. That covenant was broken. Are we on?
Yes, we are.
I think we're on today. We're on to something. So,